Yeah, just put it on the charger.
No, it's almost full.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I'm talking to the walls right now. The first good morning is for the physical people. This is for the virtual people.
I actually really
They're physical
contemplated
too.
like the difference between Yetzer Hara and
Oh, I forgot. That's supposed to be the start of today's class.
I
Thank
really
you.
was like, Nati and I talked about it.
Yeah, they literally put out.
Yeah, we did take off
Like paper.
Okay, so what were you going to say? What would you like to say about it?
I think we talked, well, I don't know, she helps me teach me, but Yetzer Hara is when everyone's like, this is my evil, bad inclination, that's the Yetzer Hara, and then Nefesh Shabahamis is within it, I think we talked
No,
about.
like the Yetzer Hara is like the impulse who might do bad, and then Nefesh Shabahamis is like natural desires that like a person has that doesn't mean that it's bad.
Right. That would be the first point to bring out. The word Yetzer Hara, actually, the definition of the word is bad inclination. So that's the inclination to do bad. Nefesh Bahamis, if we just translate it, is an animal soul. An animal is not by definition bad. It's just not godly, has no higher purpose in life, higher, deeper and higher meaning in life, but it's not bad. That's number one, which means that the desire, the passion, the drive. In fact, there are certain people that, they were not religious and they had a tremendous drive for this project, that project, had nothing to do with Yiddishkeit, just different projects, different things that they thought that make the world a better place. Then they got involved in Yiddishkeit and they have the same drive and the same fire and the same enthusiasm, but now it's in Yiddishkeit. So the essence of Nefesh Bahamis is actually parav, so to speak. And it can go in either direction. But Yetzer Hara usually implies something which is actually negative. But there's something deeper, and that's why I'm bringing it in, because it's related to this mimer.
When would you say like, oh, this is my Nefesh Bahamis? Like what's an example?
When you're hungry or sleepy or your sex drive, all of those are come from your.
Like when, in the morning when was this in Tanya? I don't know, like when you wake up and you want to go back to bed, I thought that was your Yetzer Hara.
It is.
It's not your Yetzer Tov.
Yeah, right. But is it your Nefesh Bahamis? No.
Your animals.
It is an Nefesh Bahamis. I'll tell you why. What do you want? You don't want anything bad. You just want to sleep. So you want to feel good. You want to feel comfortable.
So which one?
It's snowing outside. It's cold. I want to be cozy under my covers. It could be both.
Okay.
Because it's not letting me do what I'm supposed to do, so it's a Yetzer Hara. In other words, what I said yesterday was that generally speaking, they exchange. Like when our speech sort of, we're not so specific. Academically, when you're learning a mimer and a sefer from a rebbe, they'll be more precise when they'll use this, when they'll use that. But generally speaking, what I said yesterday was generally speaking, in Chassidus, the word that's used mostly is Nefesh Bahamis. In Svarim outside of Chassidus, they don't even recognize the term Nefesh Bahamis, they only use the term Yetzer Hara. So I want to explain the difference between Yetzer Hara and Nefesh Bahamis and a little bit broader. So the difference is like this, that the Yetzer Hara is, like we said yesterday, think of it like as if there was, and maybe that's exactly what it means, there's an angel that's in charge of every person. So there's also an angel that projects thoughts, drives, feelings, impulses in me in a negative direction. So when we think of the word Yetzer Hara, I think everyone, what we're really thinking of is some sort of outside force, whichever way we'll put it, and that's pushing me to go in a certain direction. Nefesh Bahamis, the word Nefesh Bahamis has a different meaning and different connotation. Animal soul. It's not something outside of me that's pushing me in a direction. This is me. Nefesh Bahamis means my soul. I am. My identity is a Nefesh Bahamis. In fact, without studying Chassidus in chapter 2 in Tanya, one would think this is really what a person is all about. The person has physical, materialistic drives, natural drives. Another name for Nefesh Bahamis in Tanya is actually Nefesh Hativis. You know what that means? The natural soul. I think that makes it even more clear. It's not bad. It's just a soul that has a desire for self-gratification, for pleasure. I want to live. I want to be happy. I want to have a good time. These things are Nefesh Bahamas. Let me explain a little bit better. Nefesh Bahamas is not a force. This is really, in a certain way, my essence. Chassidus teaches us something revolutionary, that you have a deeper essence, as if to say, there are two layers in my identity. The outer layer is the way it feels, that it's Nefesh Bahamas, all I want. In fact, let me put it this way. Even a person who is motivated to learn Torah mitzvahs on the surface, very often it is because this will make me happier. This will bring me reward. So again, it's about what it's doing for me. And that's the way we normally function. The things I want are things that I gain something out of it. Other people make me angry. I feel competition. I feel jealous. These normal feelings are all about my Nefesh Bahamas, which means this is my soul. This is me. This is my identity. And we say there's a deeper layer, and that's the true, purer identity, Nefesh Olakis. So in a sense, the difference between Nefesh and Yetzer means inclination. There's something which is pushing me in a different direction, and the something is as if a force outside of me. Nefesh Bahamas is defining me. I am a person, and there's a part of my nature, part of my identity, which is very similar to an animal, that we want things like animal wants, which is pleasure and happiness and being comfortable, eat when I'm hungry and sleep when I'm tired, and all these things, no different than an animal. In fact, when you look in Tanya and he starts describing the Nefesh Bahamas, today is Chavdal Tevis, the Alter Rebbe is the author of Tanya. If you can give me this for 1 second, I want to read what it says. Sometimes we just don't pay attention, but when you read the word, it's almost like shocking. Let's see how the Alter Rebbe describes Nefesh Bahamas. When you describe the Yetzer Hara, the easy, an inclination to do bad things. How does Alter Rebbe describe it in Nefesh Bahamas? It goes like this. Every soul, every person has two souls. One of them is Klipa v'Sitracha. And what is it? It's in the blood, gives you life. So what's so bad about that? It's in my blood and gives me life. How is that anything negative? So the answer is just the idea that I have an identity outside of godliness. That is the essence of Nefesh Bahamas. There's me and there's Hashem. The Nefesh Elokis doesn't have independent identity. Its identity is its oneness with Hashem. It feels that it's a manifestation of Hashem. It's an extension of Hashem. The Nefesh Bahamas is the sense of self. And that sense of self in its own merit is not bad, but it is separation. And from that separation, what I want for myself is not necessarily for Hashem. I want to eat, and I want to drink, and I want to make money, and I want to be happy, and I want to be famous. I want, and I want, and I want. And that's what happened with Adam and Chava. Initially, there was just one thing. Hashem and me were one. So no matter what they saw, it didn't provoke any kind of negative feelings in them. Once there was a sense of self, something separate from Hashem, then they saw that there's something to be embarrassed of, and that's why they needed the levushim, they needed the clothing. So Nefesh Bahamas is that sense of self, which again, it's not a crime. The Eibishter created us that way, and he wants us to have that. Don't think of it as, oh, this is a terrible thing. Sense of self means being a human being, not an angel, that's all. So if you think being human is a crime, you have a problem. So in fact, I'll get to you in a second. The beginning of Tanya, the part I just read, he said, whether it's a tzaddik or anybody else, we all have a Nefesh Bahamas. That's the definition of human, a person that has a sense of self. Tzaddikim work on it, and they try to work that their sense of self should merge with my deeper identity, which is Hashem. But in essence, that sense of self is a Nefesh Bahamas. And just like a behemoth, that is not bad, but if I leave it undisciplined, and I don't watch it, I don't sort of take care of it, it might end up doing things which is damage just because it's a behemoth, an animal doesn't understand better. My Nefesh Bahamas, if I leave it undisciplined, eventually the desire for eating and drinking and fun and everything else could grow to the point where it'll lead me away from doing the right thing. Yes, Ariella.
So these Nefesh Bahamas, Bahamas is from Accra,
Right.
and then peace is from Massachusetts, peace is from Kedusha. So all you need is like kind of borderline in between the.
So we have both, right? We have within us something which is pure Kedusha, and that's sort of my deepest identity, the core of my real identity. And then I have the identity I'm conscious of, and that's Masit Racha. Not Klipas, it's Klipas Noga, which means it's not pure Klipa, but the sense of self, according to Chassidus, that's the definition of Klipa. Anything which is identified in a way that it's separate from godliness, by definition, is klipa. Klipa means it covers godliness. Okay, is it clear? Any questions? That clear? Nama, you look like you have a question.
No, it's very clear.
Okay.
It's kind of a little bit of an identity crisis. Maybe help me, like,
Welcome to the club.
it's been a while since I've read this stuff, so.
Who am I? Will the real me rise?
So like the human definition, the definition of human itself, sense of self, which is nefesh habahamis, which also means klipa. The definition of human is klipa. But klipa just means shell.
Exactly.
Like,
You're
yeah,
thinking
not
of klipa
necessarily
as
bad.
Klipa.
you think of
Klipa's
klipa
not the,
as
like, part.
evil. No, klipa means shell. Exactly. Klipa just means
Yeah, you- like you're blocking the shem, it's like a covering.
yeah,
It's
anything
not a
which
covering.
doesn't manifest, anything which is not transparent, that's
Got
called
it.
klipa.
Whoa, don't worry, we're not like all bad.
When you learn Tanya,
So like our body, like our self is like blocking Hashem.
yeah,
Whoa.
anything in the world that doesn't manifest openly, clearly, in a transparent way, godliness is blocking Hashem. So when you learn Chassidus, you actually realize that I'm using a different vocabulary. The word Russia is not what Russia means. The word klipa is not what people think, like impurity. And the whole language changes. And that's why you can talk to someone. I remember I was once giving a Tanya class in a yeshiva, which was not a Hasidic yeshiva. I used to travel to Philadelphia and give this class in Chassidus. And these boys, it was all new to them. And I remember I was talking about Gashmias and Ruchnias. Gashmi is a good thing and a Ruchni is a good thing. And after a while, I realized that we're not really connecting. They don't get it. So as we're talking, I realized they're defining it this Gashmi means eating, drinking, and sleeping. And Ruchni is learning and davening. What I was trying to say is, no, there are certain things that they're physical entities. They have physical dimensions. They can be felt and touched and smelled and tasted. And there are things that exist that are not physical, like emotion, intellect. They exist. They don't have physical dimensions. You can't measure it. It's not round. It's not pointy. It's not rectangular. And in fact, anything that can be grasped with the 5 dimensions, by definition, is ruchnius. So it means you can't touch it, you can't smell it, you can't taste it, you can't see it, you can't hear it. That's not a physical entity. It's not as physical. Okay. So at the end, I asked him if he understood. So one guy says, "Yeah, I understand. I once heard that a ghost is ruchnius." In other words, what he was imagining was, again, something physical, but invisible, maybe. You can't see it. It's not, but it's like we can't get, before you start learning Chassidus, you sort of can't get out of that mode. Anything you think of has to have length, width, and has to have physical dimensions. It's not true. There's a whole realm of existence that's not with the physical dimensions. And that's called ruchnius. So there's ruchnius in this world, there's ruchnius in those worlds. But I began to realize that we speak a different language. When you study Chassidus, you speak a different language. I once went to a shul out in, we used to go sometimes to speak in other shuls, give over a sicha. I went to the shul with this rabbi. His name was Rabbi Bamza, very famous rabbi here in America. He was the head of a Bezdin. And he introduced me. Somebody from Chabad came to speak in us, coming to speak in our shul. And then he said like this, I had 3 stages. My first stage was, I really wasn't so favorable about Chabad. And when they called me up the first time, they said, could someone come and speak? I said, no. My second stage was, I was Chabad, but I was a closet Lubavitcher. And now I'm an open Lubavitcher. He actually had a situation where he had a heart attack, and he wrote to the Rebbe, and literally he saw an open miracle, and since then he became, but in the beginning, he was very prominent in his circle, so he didn't identify as Chabad. He called himself a closet Lubavitcher. And now I'm a Lubavitcher. So when they first called me the first time, and I said, I'm sorry, I'd rather they don't come. So the person on the phone said, no, I respect that, but could you just give me the reason why? Like, what's your reason? So this is what he said. Chabad speaks a different language. We don't understand what you're talking about. It's a different language. When you start learning Chassidus, it's a different language. The word Ra, Russia, Klipa. And that's why it's important when you do speak to someone who's not familiar with Chassidus, that you speak in their language. I don't mean you're changing the content, you just change the language. You speak in a way that a person could understand what you're saying. So really, if you would tell somebody, oh, according to Tanya, you're Russia, they would be so offended. They would stop talking to you forever because how dare you call me a Russia? But there's a level of Russia and Tanya that I would wish upon myself that maybe one day in my lifetime I should be on that level. If you look at Tanya, chapter 11. And it doesn't mean the other definition doesn't exist. It just means in context of Tanya, there's a different definition, that's all. And I guess the same with the word shtus. Whoever heard of shtus being a positive word? And over here, not only it's positive, it's higher than serving Hashem on the highest levels. It's beyond logic, it's infinite. So now I want to touch on another detail. How come in the Friedrich Rebbe's generation, that was sort of the call of the hour? What was the reason why there are times that the call of the hour is to serve Hashem in a way which is shtus the Kedusha? In fact, remember I told you that this is a subject that you'll hardly find in other Maimarim. It's very rarely talked about. And here, this is the main point of the whole Maimar. So one of the ways the Rebbe explains it was that at that time, in the 1920s, when the Friedrich Rebbe became Rebbe, what was going on was shtus the klipa in the highest form. Imagine there were Jews who joined the communist regime, a whole few hundred of them, young kids, and they were determined to uproot any trace of Torah, Judaism in Russia. When I say determined, I mean literally using physical force, violence, and murder, which means the person who arrested the Friedrich Rebbe picked up his hand. He was 25 years old, and said, you see this hand? You have no idea how many people I killed with my bare hands. He was priding himself. These are Jewish kids, came from homes where they learned Torah and they did mitzvahs. So the whole thing was like, you can say, was crazy that kids can come from such a background and go all the way off. Yes, it was a result of generations of enlightenment and alienating people from Torah, from Judaism, but still a strong sense of Judaism. But to go that far, to hate to the point of murder, that was like this person was the one who was supposed to, God forbid, shoot the Friedrich Rebbe, wanted to execute him. Who was it? A kid, 24, 25 years old, a Jewish kid coming from a Jewish home. And not only that, he actually had from a Hasidic, a Lubavitch Hasidic home was his origin. How does it make sense? So what was going on could only be explained that spiritually there was something crazy going on in the world. And the Klippa was actually acting in a way which was absolutely, even from Klippa standards, was illogical, was absolutely insane. So because you had to fight something which was sort of insane in the Klippa side, we needed an Avodah in the Kedusha side that's also shtus above Seichel. That was the way to counteract what was coming against us from the side of Kedusha. That's one explanation. There's another one, and that is in a positive way. So I'd like to say that in our generation, the things the Rebbe introduced are also shtus the Kedusha, which means in our generation, Baruch Hashem, people don't have to give up their lives, but most of the things that the Rebbe introduced were the kind of things that caused raised eyebrows by everybody else around in the world. Like, whoever heard of such a thing? Jews never did something like this. Stop someone on the street and ask him to put on the tefillin on the street. kids go marching in the street. You know, Yiddishkeit was always modesty, quiet, not loud. Make a march in the street, take a truck and put on a loudspeaker and scream and shout and play music, all these things. I mean, a lot of it, the world has become used to it already and actually following our example. But in the beginning, there was so much criticism. The whole idea of asking someone to put on tefillin was criticized. Lighting Shabbos candle was criticized because what kind of business lighting Shabbos candle? Either you keep Shabbos or you don't. What do you mean just light Shabbos candle? And one of the ladies can end up lighting it after sundown. She's actually doing an Aveira. So there was tremendous criticism. You can't even imagine what happened when the Rebbe said, okay, now we got to go out and tell the non-Jews about their 7 mitzvahs. What? So whoever heard of such a thing? We're finished with all the Jews already. Now we got to do the non-Jews. And I'm talking about even raised eyebrows in Chabad, where people are like, what? Is that what the Rebbe said? To go out to the non-Jews and tell them about 7 mitzvahs. So all these things were sort of really revolutionary, even in the standards of Chabad. It was not done before. Chabad is learning, davening, Chassidus, Farbrengens, but this idea, going out into the street, going to a college campus, going to places where normally a chassid would sort of run away from being in those environments, and now we go there and we're teaching Tanya to somebody who is like so foreign from Yiddishkeit. All these things were things that in the beginning was very, very hard for people to accept. And also the way the Rebbe empowered women, this is also something which is revolutionary. And even to this day, it's not acceptable in most communities. But the Rebbe made women to be shluchos, and they're in charge of institutions, and they're running the world in so many different ways. All the shluchos, the Rebbetzins, the things that they accomplish out there. And in general, a lot of things that women today are running. And the Rebbe spoke to women. The whole shul emptied out. The women came in, and the Rebbe spoke to the women. The Rebbe gave out a Tanya or a Sefer. He gave out to the men and to the women. And these things were by other Rebbes of Chabad. Women didn't even have the opportunity to go in privately to speak to the Rebbe. That was something very unusual. So the Rebbe began to relate to women in a whole new way. Women should study Chassidus the way we study today. So all these things are also, in a way, like even in Kedusha, there wasn't really room for something like this. So there's another way of explaining why we need Shtus Kedusha, not because to counteract the negative, but to get ready for the positive. Being that when Mashiach comes, the highest levels of godliness will be revealed, which means this Or Ein Sof that we're talking about, this infinite light that's above and beyond everything, will come down into this world, and that's why the world will be a different world than the way we know it now. So in order to prepare for that and to be a vessel for that, we have to do something which makes us ready for this kind of And what we need to do is Shtus Kedusha. Give up our own, imagine people that are shluchim, they don't have time for their own children, they don't have time for their own personal spiritual growth. Give everything up and just be dedicated for years and years. I would just want to tell you to think about this a little bit. There was a war, especially in Russia. People had first the communists, then they had the Nazis, and people were like worn out from just running and wandering from place to place, not having a normal life. Finally, the war is over. Then they have to risk their life to get out of Russia. In 1945, a lot of Lubavitcher Hasidim managed to escape Russia. How did they escape? Because Russia had a deal with Poland that they're going to allow 1 million Polish citizens to leave. So all of a sudden, all the Russian Hasidim became Polish citizens. How did they become Polish citizens? They had to have false documents. And they found documents. They had people who forged documents that they're Polish. And that's how they were able to escape. When you escape, what are you thinking? Okay, finally. Comes along the Frierdiker Rebbe and says, oh, you're out? Okay, I'd like you to go to Morocco and spread Yiddishkeit there. Morocco, the guy just went through how many years? Some of them were sitting in jail, in Russian jails. And you finally come to a sort of, you can relax a little bit, pick yourself up and go to the end of the world here, there, and start spreading Yiddishkeit. It was not Seichel D'Kedusha, it's beyond. But here it's in a positive way. And the positive way is because we should be able to be a vessel to receive the Or Ein Sof. Like by the wedding, the reason why it was dancing in a way which is Shtus Kedusha is to receive that light, which is infinite light that comes at a wedding. Okay, let's move a little bit more in the mimer. And we're up to the bottom of the page, 115. We'll start with the last line on the page. After all this explanation, they had the Avodah in the Mishkan, in the sanctuary that was in the desert, as well as the Beis HaMikdash in Yerushalayim. It was all about transforming darkness into light, which means not just eliminating the darkness, removing the darkness, and making room for light, but that the darkness itself would be shining. How is that possible? The mashtus that we turn it around, like I just finished saying, that shtus, which is klipa, is turned around, and I serve Hashem with shtus of kedusha. So just like the person that I described before, that was driven to do this project and that child, very, very active and proactive and an organizer, but they were organizing negative things. And then when they turn around, they don't give up their gifts. They don't give up their talents. They're using that talent that they had, and they're organizing kedusha things. So in a sense, the darkness, what was used before to promote darkness, is being used now to promote light. Here too, the drive I had before for shtus of klipa is now being turned around, and I have the same drive, but it's shtus the kedusha. So that's turning around the darkness, that not only the darkness is moved out of the way, but the darkness itself becomes a source of light. And that's why the Mishkan was built out of specific kind of wood, the wood that's called Atzei Shitim. Because that's something which alludes, in other words, this wood has in it a certain trait, and what it teaches us and alludes to is the fact that our avodah is to serve Hashem l'mayla min hadas, above logic, but this becomes as a result of the shtus, which is below logic. Hashem says, I want to dwell and rest in each and every one of you. So that means that everyone has their individual path, individual sparks that they have to elevate. Shapel, I'm doing that, I'm turning my darkness into light. So generally speaking, in Kabbalah and Chassidus, it's explained how every person, it was designated before they came down to this world, that they have to elevate a certain amount of sparks of godliness. Not only a certain amount, but it was also designated which sparks they have to elevate. So the fact that my neshama came down in Brooklyn, and someone else's neshama came down in California, and someone else's neshama came down in Honolulu, is because our sparks were in these places. Then I pick myself up and I go on a trip. I go to Australia, I go to France, I go to Israel. That means there's some of my sparks in all these different places. So Hashem arranges a reason here and there that I go to those places. So everyone has sparks of Hashem that they were designated. This is my mission. I have to elevate those sparks. And it works both ways. Those sparks are sort of waiting for me to come and they elevate them. And I'm waiting to elevate those sparks. There's a story with the Frierdiker Rebbe that he was traveling with his father, the Rebbe Rashab. And as they're traveling, this is in the country area, they see from the distance two Chassidim sitting. It was a hot summer day. And they're sitting without their shirt, just with their tzitzis. And one of them is speaking and the other one's listening, and both have their eyes tightly closed. So the Friedrich Rebbe tells the wagon driver to stop the wagon, and the Rebbe Rashab, and tells his son, the Friedrich Rebbe, go close and listen to what are they learning, what are they doing. These were Chassidim. So he goes over close and he listens and he hears that they're reviewing the Maimah that the Rebbe Rashab said the past Shabbos or something. And the Rebbe Rashab said that year was, I forgot what year it was, but he said like this, it's 5,660 something years that spot is waiting for someone to come and study Torah right there by that place. And now it finally happened. So we all have our sparks to elevate in general. And then specifically, there's certain things in the world that we're familiar with that are also shtus of klipa. Doesn't really make sense. It's just, this is the way people do it, and that's all. And I have to turn that around. There's certain things, there's certain things he does, and he says in Yiddish, which means that's what people do. In other words, I can't really explain it, but this is like we say in English, I just want to go with the flow. If that's what people do, that's what I do. But there's no real rhyme and reason why I have to do things in this specific way. But some of these things, they're like some sort of a rule that are untouchable, unmovable. You can't move it out of its place because that's the way people are. Which means if I want to be like everybody else, and therefore even if there would be an explanation that someone is going to be like blue in the face explaining me why it's not a good thing to do or a good thing to do something different, it won't budge because this is the way everybody does it and I don't want to be different. I don't want to be different, I want to go with the flow is one of those things that I was referring to as l'matam and aseichel. There's not a logic to it. I can't explain that I'm doing this for a reason. The reason is because that's what everybody's doing. And the same as with a lot of other things, that the way people conduct themselves, that it's all about, this is the way it's done, even though we can't explain it, even though I don't necessarily see the wisdom in it. We have to turn this around to above seichel. And it gives an example. Time that a person has for going to sleep, a time to eat, the way people out there in the world have it. These are set times. So you call somebody up, again, somebody who's conducting their life in a sort of normal, settled way, will say, sorry, it's supper time now, call me before, call me after, supper time. Or the same is with time to go to bed, I'll have to take care of this tomorrow, I have to go to sleep. I mean, of course, there's extreme. I think we once spoke about this, that Jews that came from Germany are very punctual. Time is very, very important. And I once witnessed it myself. I once spent a Shabbos in Washington Heights. That's the community of German Jews. And the person I stayed by told me that not all Germans are very punctual. He said, for example, if they announce in Shul Friday night that tomorrow davening is starting 8:30 in the morning, the chazan, whoever's designated to be the chazan, to lead the davening, if it's 8:30 and nobody's there, he's going to start, even though the shul is empty. Because, of course, time is a time. But we also have those that are not so punctual. They would probably start at 8:32. So this is a true story. Everyone knows of the family. There's a certain family in Israel, very famous family, that this family, they're all Chabad, their parents are Chabad, but the grandfather was a German Jew, religious Jew, but not a Chassid. And he was at his son's wedding. Came 11 o'clock at night, and he said, now it's Schlafstunde, time to go to sleep, and good night. And he left the wedding and went home to go to sleep. Because time to sleep is a time to sleep. I think most people are not like that, but apparently in Germany, time is a time. So everyone has this to some extent, eating is a time to eat, and sleeping is a time to sleep, and business is a time to do business. And these times you can't interrupt me. Mikol Mokem, Zmanim Elu, most of the cases, these times are built in Zazim or built in Adachim Klal V'Ikar. On the other hand, the time set aside for Torah, the time set aside for davening, nidachim, they get pushed around. They're not so fixed. Something comes up, it gets moved out of the way. Someone told me that he was once on Mivtzoyim, and he's talking to this man or a woman, and she was crying that one of her children is marrying out, and she's very upset. And she said, I don't understand how this happened. Our home was a very, Jewish home. And so he said, what do you mean by a very Jewish home? So he said, like my husband, whenever he didn't have any meetings at work, he would come home and make a Shabbos meal Friday night and Kiddush. Of course, he didn't say it to her, not to make her hurt. But the key words were, whenever he didn't have a meeting at work, he would come home and make Kiddush. And when he did have a meeting at work, he wouldn't come home to make Kiddush. In other words, if I have something at work, that's going to push aside my Kiddush. So if you think of it, the child also grew up with that notion that Yiddishkeit is Yiddishkeit when I have the time for it, when it's not pushing aside my other interests. But if it does, then the other things come first. So that's what he's saying, that the time set aside for davening, the time set aside for eating, for drinking, for work and business, these are times that are unmovable and untouchable. But the time set aside for learning and davening and doing mitzvahs, they are things that are moved around. And there are certain cases, first they get moved around. Oh, I should have had this shir on Tuesday night. Tonight I can't attend, so we'll have it on Wednesday night. Or I should have been davening this hour because of my work. I'll daven a different hour. And it's not set. And eventually, what it leads to is that it can get pushed away completely. First, I get to push it off from this moment to that moment, from this day to that day. But eventually, once it gets pushed around, then it comes to a point where I couldn't do it this week. I'll do it next week. Next week, I couldn't do it, so I'll do it the week after. And eventually, it doesn't get done at all. Now here, the Frierdiker Rebbe says something which is like it was an open prophecy, because this mimer was the last mimer. He gave it out Friday before his passing, and at that point, the Frierdiker Rebbe, he wasn't healthy, but there was no condition that even remotely suggested that this would be the last day of his life. But he said, if a person would stop and think, is there any real wisdom to live this way? Nobody knows their time, when it's going to be. Like it says in the Medrash, Ein Adam Shalit Leim Hamtinuli Acha Esechej Benoisai Vacha Tzavah Lebeisi. No one has the privilege to tell that angel when he comes and say, well, wait, give me a few more days or weeks to live. I want to take care of and settle all my things. God forbid, no one knows when that time is going to be. So there's no wisdom to such a life that a person is dedicating themselves to everything else except for Torah, mitzvahs, and Yiddishkeit. And therefore, a person should think, what am I living for? What's the purpose why I'm here in this world? So these words, the Frierdiker Rebbe alluded to that this is what's going on. And the reason why people could live this way is only because of the Ruach Shtus, that they don't see the emes, they forget Hashem created me for a purpose, and the life that I'm leading is totally neglecting the main purpose and getting involved in all the things that are just secondary. They're all there for a means to an end. And I'm forgetting about the end and dedicating myself only to the thing which is a means to an end. And that's Shtuz the Klipa. We have to turn that around to Shtuz the Kedusha. So we'll turn it around next week, the last few lines of the Maimer. And then after that, we'll go back to the definitions, the terms, the Hasidic terms which you skipped, and the questions. So if you want to work on this over Shabbos, you're welcome. Today is Chavdala Tevis, the Alter Rebbe's yard site. So today we'll have it from Rengen from 10:30 and on, instead of the regular classes. We'll have a little from Rengen. I'll talk about the Alter Rebbe, about the Alter Rebbe's passing, what happened, and a lot of interesting things about the history of Chabad connected to this. Okay, the Shabbos.
You can do so.